Welcome to the bonfire, unkindled one.
Hey everyone, it's BlueLizardJello, and welcome back to Everything Possible in Dark Souls 3. Last time, we finished up Archdragon Peak, we killed the Nameless King, which we now know is Lord Gwyn's firstborn, and we also killed Hawkwood and solved the case of the missing Dragonstones. But before we actually continue on, we need to head back to Archdragon Peak because I missed an item. That's right, it is not the first and probably won't be the last, but thank you so much to Dino Omelette, Anonymous X, and a couple others to be honest, who actually pointed out that this is something that not only did I miss in the episode, I truly didn't know that it even existed. But from the location where we fought Havel, we can drop down this ledge, take a moderate amount of fall damage, and just to give you an idea of where we are, you can take a look down at these stone crystal lizards. This is also where we fought the wyvern. But then down this path, down these stairs, and through this archway, we have another stone crystal lizard. We'll just deal with him quickly. And by that I mean we're just going to knock him right off the ledge. Now I will tell you that I tried to record this once before and something happened to the footage, so unfortunately the corpse that is before me is bare, but it did contain an item. And that shiny is actually a miracle that I cannot believe I did not know about. It is the Great Magic Barrier. Now, don't get too excited, because unfortunately the miracle's not all that great. It requires 25 faith to cast, it lasts 45 seconds, and it is a self buff that will greatly increase your magic damage absorption. Said to be a tale of Havel the Rock, arch enemy of Seath the Scaleless, Havel despised magic and was never complacent in preparing means to counter it. So there you go. You want completion? I'm trying to give you completion, so please accept my most sincere apologies for not showing this miracle that sadly I just didn't know about. But once again, thank you for pointing it out in the comments, and please continue if I miss anything in the future. But now back to Firelink Shrine, and behind us sits Greirat the Thief.
You know, I was thinking about leaving for another round of thieving. There must be something of use in Lothric Castle. I'm aware of the danger. That castle is a death trap. Not a single man has returned from the castle unscathed, even back in the day. But I don't want to sit around and die a petty rat. And I consider myself your friend.
Now there are guides out there that claim you can save Greirat when he goes to Lothric Castle, but understand when you send him to pillage, that simply is not true.
Thank you for placing your trust in me. Don't you worry. I know Lothric like the back of my hand.
Agreeing to send him on this final journey will be the last time that we see Greirat alive.
Goodbye. I will leave for some time. So long for now. Do stay safe, you hear? Or my efforts will have been for naught.
Greirat, it has been an absolute pleasure from the moment that I rescued you from that cell until the time that I just said goodbye. Now before we head to our next location, which is indeed Lothric Castle, let's take a look at our gear. I am using the Irithyll Straightsword +5, the Black Bow of Faris, and some feather arrows just for a couple of key moments. I also have the Dark Hand, which I will be using as a shield, ineffectively I might add. I also have a Pyromancy Flame upgraded to +10. My armor is the Fire Witch Helm, Wolf Knight Armor, Drakeblood Gauntlets, and the Drakeblood Leggings. I have the Chloranthy Ring, the Deep Ring for the added attunement slot, the Great Swamp Ring, as well as the Witch's Ring for the added Pyromancy damage boost, and I also have the Silver Cat Ring for a couple of falls so I don't take fall damage. Standard consumable setup, although I do also have some Alluring Skulls, as well as the Undead Hunter Charms. And for those of you curious about my stats, here they are now. Before we actually head to Lothric Castle, I also have some spells and I want to show those off. I do have Rapport, so I can actually turn some enemies onto my side, the Chaos Bed Vestiges, as well as Fire Orb. But now, let us head to the Dancer of the Boreal Valley's bonfire, and we'll proceed. We've already climbed up this ladder once before, and that is when we were heading to the Consumed King's Garden and we fought against the Consumed King Aceros. Over here, I will show you exactly where you can drop down in order to get onto this staircase, but it really serves little to no purpose. Instead, we're going to head straight, and right in this first room, we're going to see Rapport at work. Sort of. You can see we have a Lothric Knight straight ahead, seems to be bowing to a fallen comrade. And directly in front of him, we have a Cleric, and that Cleric is both going to buff and heal the Lothric Knight, so we have to be careful and we need to prioritize our damage on the Clerics. But what I'm trying to do here is actually get enough distance from the Knight and myself so I can cast Rapport. You can see here that he is now under my spell, but unfortunately, he's not attacking the Cleric. So I'll have to do that myself. But as you can see, when they are under the effects of Rapport, not only should they attack the enemies around them, but you can also walk right up to them and they're completely placid. You can get backstabs, you can wail on them, and until Rapport wears off, they will not do anything to you, typically. Got a large Titanite shard from this night. We're going to be collecting several of those this episode. Here is our shortcut elevator that, as you can imagine, does not operate from this side. And then over where the Lothric Knight was praying, we do get the soul of a crestfallen knight. Coming up this staircase, we do have another pair of clerics as well as a pair of the Lothric Knights, one with a sword and one with a spear. Now I'm going to attempt to show off Rapport yet again, this time with slightly better results. But first what I want to do is actually get the knights close together. So you can see I get both of their attention and then dodge around a bit until I feel like it's relatively safe to use Rapport. But even though I got it off, I still did take a little bit of damage, but just look at how devastating the knight is when he's on our side. At this point, I can just sit back and watch the magic, and then I can just finish off the knight who's already been badly damaged in the encounter. And just like that, those two knights are dead, and I get a large Titanite shard, and then I get another large Titanite shard, as well as the Lothric Knight Longspear. Not a guaranteed drop, but always nice to see. Now, I did play a dangerous game in not taking care of these clerics first, because like I said, they can boost the Lothric Knights and increase their damage greatly, but they can also heal them, and they can heal them to full. Here we have our very next bonfire. And because I'm not worried about the enemies that we already fought, I am going to rest, that way we can get any of our Estus or our health back. And then directly behind us, over on this balcony, this is where you can quickly drop back onto that staircase and head back either to the Consumed King's Garden or to the Dancer of Bonfire. Why you need to do that, I don't really know. Hey, I'm just the messenger. In this room, we have a chest that I opened without even thinking, and inside we get the hood, robe, and skirt of prayer. Prince Lothric's hood. The prince, destined to be a Lord of Cinders, was cherished by the royal family, despite being born into illness, a frail and shriveled child. His swaddling clothes were made of aged, coarse cloth, used in ancient prayer, and are all that he has ever worn. So we get a little bit of a backstory of Prince Lothric, someone that we are going to be meeting relatively soon. But not this episode. Just at the top of this staircase, very hard to miss, we have a Titanite chunk. We will also be picking up several of these this episode, which is going to be very handy. Now, as we start to climb these stairs, there are going to be more and more of these enemies, both the shield and sword, the crossbows, but we're also going to have some halberd types. So using Alluring Skulls may actually make it a little bit easier, that way you can pick them off as they're focused on the skulls. We have quite the decision of where to go, but for now we're going to deal with the enemies that are closest to us. Starting with this guy right here. Don't want him taking any pot shots at us. And then as we peer into the sky, we have a brand new creature. These are pilgrim butterflies, and we're going to be seeing them throughout Lothric Castle, and they're going to play an important and dangerous role in the boss fight here. Taking care of him, and then watch this enemy with the shield. Of course, if he's going to insist on turtling, we know how to deal with that. But first, no surprises. We've seen this before. Using the weapon art of the straight sword, Can knock his shield aside and get the critical. And don't worry, I didn't forget about the shiny. We get another Titanite chunk. And right inside this next room, you're tempted to run right to that shiny, but don't be fooled. We all know From Software's tricks, and that is an axe-wielding winged knight. As soon as we walk under it, he is going to drop it if we're fast enough. We can simply get to the ladder and climb just out of his reach. Now from here, if you'd like, you can do a drop attack. Or if you have any sort of projectiles or spells, you can try to use them from up here. But I'm going to show you a much easier and, well, I'm just going to call it cheesy way of fighting him. But don't miss this illusory wall, give it one whack, and then inside we have some really interesting loot, including, right on this corpse in front of a painting of a winged knight, we get the entire winged knight armor. The winged knight armor is one of the few mentions that we have of Gertrude, the heavenly daughter, and it mentions that she was imprisoned because the worship of divine messengers was viewed as heresy. One more item to loot, and that is the Sacred Bloom Shield. This is one of two shields that has the very interesting ability that it can actually parry spells. Now, unfortunately, as a shield goes, this is not very impressive. It cannot be infused, it's upgraded with Twinkling Titanite, it has very low stability, it's only 43 when upgraded to its maximum of +5, but as I said, it can parry spells. Now, if you are curious, yes, it can also parry physical attacks, and it seems to have the parry window of a small shield. Just don't try and rely on it to actually save your life if there's incoming damage, unless you're really good at parrying everything that comes your way. Even though it wouldn't have been much damage, I did switch to the Silver Cat ring. I also wanted to take the moment to show you that you can actually switch rings with that window open, that way you don't have to open the menu again once you've landed to switch to your original ring. But now, using rapport yet again, we have just made this winged knight our pet. Which is probably a horrible thing to call it, considering now we're just going to engage in just heartless slaughter. A backstab and a few R1s later, and he is dead. And he dropped a Titanite chunk for us, and he was guarding a single Twinkling Titanite. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention was that I chose the Irithyll Straightsword for a very particular reason. Well, I guess a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was really interesting with this build, because I've actually started calling it the Fire and Ice build, but against the boss of this area, it's going to prove to be very, very effective, but it does actually work on some of the enemies leading up to it, as we just saw against that Winged Knight. Now, me taking out this hollow is really not the most important thing that I could be doing, but I am going to show you in a moment that what he is throwing are undead hunter charms, and he did hit me. Which means, if I now switch to my Estus Flask, and I try to use it, I am extremely confused. That's right, apparently the Undead Hunter Charm doesn't just prevent healing, it just makes your character forget how to heal. Bit of a gauntlet here, you think you only have 2 crossbowmen, but then lo and behold, a great axe wielding hollow will come out of nowhere. So we'll just get his attention and lead him away. A few more whacks later, there we go, and he dropped for us a large Titanite shard, yet again. And why I chose to aggro the halberd-wielding hollow and then run up and take out the crossman, your guess is as good as mine. But all's well that ends well. And luckily, this ended well. He dropped another large Titanite shard, and we got 8 standard bolts off of this crossbowman. Down here on this unguarded corpse, we have a large Soul of a Weary Warrior. Oh, did I say it was unguarded? This gentleman was actually sitting right next to the steps, trying to ambush you, but that is why I like to actually pull that halberd up the stairs instead of fighting him down here. One more hollow down here to deal with. Taking care of him before he has a chance to stand is very easy though. 3 fire bombs off of him. Taking a look at the pilgrim butterflies and the dark sign in the sky yet again. Absolutely gorgeous. And don't miss this pair of Titanite chunks off this corpse before we continue on. We can see something dead ahead that looks to be a dragon, and indeed it is. But let's just scout our surroundings. We see an item up there. And sure enough, that is a dragon. But we have a bonfire and an item here to pick up before we continue. So we'll grab this ember, and then just like we did at the last bonfire, because we're not concerned about the enemies that we've already killed, we can regain all of our HP as well as any SS we may have used. But now I'm going to show you the real reason I brought the Black Bow of Pharis. But this is an extremely cheesy tactic, like many I use in this episode, so I'm actually going to show you in an alternate universe, so to speak, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you perhaps the way that most of you will end up doing this area. You see, this dragon is not alone, or at least he's not going to be for long. As you approach this bridge, his pale counterpart will show up, and both of them are going to start breathing fire. And even though cool guys don't look at explosions, always keep in mind they don't look at fire breath either. Always turn your back. But if you want to deal with them very easily, just do as I do. You simply want to line up your shot so you're actually hitting the back left leg of this dragon. You'll know if you're hitting the leg because it'll just barely move. Now don't worry about the little damage that I'm doing. It only takes somewhere between 102 and 115 damage for what I'm hoping to achieve to happen. Nearly there, and there we go. As soon as you hear that sound, something happens to both dragons, and they are no longer a threat. And once we get a little bit further into the area, you're going to see exactly why this just happened. But as you can see, we can run across the bridge, no harm, no foul, no more fire breath. But even though I do love a good cheese, let's see how to handle this area without the bow. Once again, I am going to trigger the next dragon. Although there is an item over here that I want to get before we actually brave that bridge. Now here's my strategy for this enemy. Get the backstab. And then use rapport as he's standing up. Because that way we just got some free damage and now we just get more. I know, you're laughing at me thinking, really, the bow strategy was cheesing but this is acceptable? No, but it's fun. And from him we got the Lothric Knight Helm and a large Titanite Shard. But more importantly in this corpse, we get the Great Lance. The Great Lance was actually one of my favorite weapons in Dark Souls 2, although I don't think it's as fun in Dark Souls 3, it can still be really effective. It's rather slow, but if you hold it in two hands, it does become much faster, and the charge skill can be very useful for closing in very quickly. Now you saw that I just switched to the Silver Cat Ring. I'm going to run almost to the end of the bridge and drop down on this side. There is a small ledge here. Switching back to my Witch's Ring. And then before you hop down, there's a couple of things you should do. One, grab this Undead Bone Shard, very important for leveling up our Estus. But then also, there is a hollow over here, hiding a little surprise for us. But at this point, we should be used to it. This is another Pus of Man. Thankfully enough, they are attracted to the alluring skulls. And now we can just use 2 Chaos Bed Vestiges and 1 Fire Orb. And that is it for the Pus of Man. He dropped for us a large Titanite Shard, but he was also guarding 2 Twinkling Titanites. Always be sure to run around this corner. Titanite chunk on this corpse. And another Titanite chunk on this corpse. And then we have another hollow. And yes, you could run up and kill him quickly, but surprise, surprise, another Pus of Man. And we'll just use the same exact strategy. Hey, if it works, why not? And with him dead, we get another large Titanite Shard. And then not so well hidden behind these crates, we do have 3 Lightning Urns. Now coming up, there is a bit of an ambush. So first we're going to run in and very quickly deal with this lizard. And if I take a little bit of damage from the throwing knife, so be it. He drops for us a pair of Twinkling Titanites. And then we have some Hollow Thieves. One to begin with, but more are going to drop down as we proceed down this hallway. The slower I go, the better. Because if we just run, we're going to attract all of them. 5 throwing knives off of him, and then we'll keep going. Beautiful Pilgrim Butterfly off in the distance. And here we go. 3 more have dropped down. 1 is already dead. Second one is dead. And even though I could have gotten away with leaving him alive, that's really not in our style. With all of the thieves accounted for, we can now proceed, and over to the right is the shiny that we saw when first entering into the dragon area. But now we have another winged knight with a halberd, with a lot of range. So instead of actually trying to use rapport when we're well within the halberd range, we'll just give him a little bit of space, and now, once again, he's our plaything. What is it with me and pets and playthings that just apparently makes me want to slaughter? That is something that I should probably talk to a professional about. Taking him out relatively easily, we get another large Titanite shard. And here we are just getting bathed in the Undead Hunter charm, but that's okay. We don't need healing just yet. Dealing with that hollow again, and we get the sniper crossbow and 11 sniper bolts. Now, sniper bolts are nothing new. We've actually been able to purchase those from Greirat ever since he returned from the Undead Settlement, but the sniper crossbow has the best range of any crossbow in the game at 59. Large soul of a nameless soldier, and then we can drop down and head back to the bonfire here. And I am going to rest again, getting that HP and Estus back. And now we're going to equip the Silver Cat Ring again, because we are going to drop off the bridge. This time, we're going to drop off much sooner. In fact, we're going to drop off right at the beginning. Switching back to the Witch's Ring, directly behind us is an item. Do not miss it, because it is another Titanite chunk. We don't have to worry about the hollows or the pus of man that they become, because they can't reach us unless we stand close to the edge. If you stand too close, they can and they will hit you. Another failed attempt at rapport here. But now, we get it off on this halberd wielding hollow, which is just perfect because not only do we have that jerk up there throwing the Undead Hunter charms, but we also have this crossbowman and the great axe wielding hollow. Now, I think I made the wrong decision there. Killing off the halberd-wielding hollow instead of actually helping him kill the great axe hollow was a poor decision, because I just took a lot of damage from that great axe. Speaking of Blues Pro strats, here's another one coming up. Another pair of Lothric Knights, one with a spear on the left and one with a greatsword on the right. What I want to do here is get a backstab on one of them and then use rapport. What I end up doing is not a backstab and then taking some damage. Luckily, I did get enough space and I can actually get rapport on the one with the greatsword, which is actually perfect because he does do a lot more damage than the spear-wielding knight. But now I can get the free backstab, and we've seen this before. We just wail on him until he's dead. Large Titanite shard, and look at this, Lothric Knight Armor and a Lightning Gem. 2 fairly uncommon drops from the Lothric Knights. My only guess as to why I just used rapport here is because I think I just had the wrong pyromancy equipped. There's really no reason for making him our ally. I guess Leylani was feeling just a bit lonely. Maybe she wanted a friend. Over here we do get another raw gem. Great for low level characters or if you have a weapon that doesn't have good scaling to begin with. On this corpse we have another large soul of a nameless soldier. And then probably the most dangerous enemy in this area we have waiting for us at the bottom of this staircase. So I'm going to make sure I have my best pyromancies equipped. You can already see the glow of his weapon. As we slowly turn the corner, we can see the unmistakable armor of another Boreal Knight. My plan here is to get one Pyromancy spell off before he actually even notices us. So if you didn't notice, what I actually just did there was I casted Chaos Bed Vestige and then I started strafing to the left. If I hadn't strafed, I would have hit the wall. But what many of you casters need to be aware of in order to be the most effective is that you typically have several steps of movement before you actually stop and cast your spell. It can be really useful for dodging certain attacks but still getting your spell off in time. Here you can see an example of exemplary dodging skills, as I take no damage whatsoever from this Boreal Knight. Sarcasm is just one of the many features that I offer. And I actually had to slow that clip down to see exactly how I killed him, and apparently during that roll I did manage to hit R1. But with him dead, we get the Irithyll Rapier. You can see that as a rapier, this is a thrusting sword, and it can also cause frostbite buildup just like the Irithyll Straight Sword. Every Outrider Knight one day devolves into a beast, constantly hounded by Pontiff Sullivan's black eyes. I just feel kind of bad for the Boreal Knights, to be honest. Down in this room we have a number of chests, and I'm going to spoil it right now by saying there are no mimics. Get a Twinkling Titanite here. 2 more here. In this chest, we get a Titanite Scale, and what do you think's in this last one? Nope, you're wrong. This is actually the Spirit Tree Crest Shield, and why I actually didn't keep it on screen is beyond me. The Spirit Tree Crest Shield, as the name implies, is another Crest Shield, and Crest Shields specialize in a particular elemental defense, in this case, lightning. I'm going to use a Green Blossom here because I want as much stamina as I can muster, because this next section is where you can get caught in the dragon's flames. But as long as you haven't aggroed them just yet, you can typically sprint right across without any damage. If you do find yourself caught in the flames, roll, 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 and keep mashing roll until you're clear. You should actually make it just fine even if you get caught. This room can be particularly dangerous because you have a number of enemies throwing firebombs, but even more dangerous are the exploding barrels that litter the room. So I'm actually going to take the long way around instead of climbing up the ladder. That way I can deal with as many of the firebomb throwing hollows as I can quickly. Head down this staircase, a short bridge over to the other platform. Taking damage from both these hollows ensures a swift victory. A couple of more of these weaker hollows here. On this corpse hanging off the ledge, we get a large soul of a nameless soldier. Then before I actually take on the enemy or the dragon that we just saw, because there is another item dealing with that hollow, and unsurprisingly enough, we actually get 3 black firebombs, so if you want to make this room explode, hey, that's your prerogative. Climbing back up the ladder, we can now see the hand of the dragon with something coming out of it. And the reason that it died when we actually shot its back left leg is because these dragons are inhabited by the Pus of Man. Which means that the Abyss is at work here. So you can see here, me doing some damage to the back leg will actually kill the dragons, but it will cause the Pus of Man to spawn. Fortunately, they're actually still stuck in the dragon's hand and they can't escape. So as long as you keep your distance and you have something that causes fire, you can kill them extremely quickly. With this first dragon taken care of, we get 2 Titanite chunks and 2 embers. And the Pus of Man also dropped for us a large Titanite shard. Now we can head out back and loop around, get a couple other pieces of loot. Hanging on this corpse, we have a Titanite chunk. By the way, just like when we fought him with the bow, as soon as you take down one of the dragons, even if you haven't killed a Pus of Man, both of the dragons will collapse and no longer breathe fire. Titanite scale on this corpse. And now we're free to loot this entire courtyard. A refined gem here. You can see that you can't do anything to this dragon now that he's collapsed. 6 lightning urns. An ember. And that's where we just came from, where we fought the Boreal Knight. And then one more item just over here. And it's another ember. So we have now cleared this courtyard. We do want to go and deal with that puzzle man, but that will have to wait just a moment. In this room, there are a number of currently placid hollows, so we'll deal with them as quickly as we can before they wake up. Over in the corner on this corpse, we have a single pale pine resin. And then right here, I accidentally hit the chest before I even got to show you that it's a mimic, but guess what? It's a mimic. I put him back to sleep with an undead hunter charm because I wanted to take care of this hollow before he actually gets the attention of all the others. In the back, there are a couple of thieves, a titanite scale. But now we can go back, deal with this one last hollow, and we can finish the mimic. We're going to do some damage, and then as he starts to stand up, we can use another undead hunter charm on him. I guess there's kind of a strong theme in this episode. It's all about me coercing enemies to my side, putting them to sleep, or confusing them with skulls. It's kind of morbid. The mimic drops for us 3 titanite scales, good for upgrading all those boss weapons that you may have by now. Down these stairs we have a lever, and you can probably guess exactly what this does. That very large portcullis is now open, a bit of a shortcut from the last bonfire. We have a large soul of a weary warrior, but then we have a very dangerous setup. Directly below us we have a Lothric knight who already has blessed his greatsword with blessed weapon, but we can get his attention with alluring skull, and then my plan was to simply cast rapport on him and have him do the dirty work for us. Here's the problem. It seems to have worked, but he is not attacking the clerics much like we saw earlier. So I'm actually wondering if maybe they will never target the clerics. Maybe they're so well trained that they won't? I'm not sure. Has anyone else tried this on the Lothric Knights and had better success? I'd love to hear your stories if so. Unfortunately, it gets better. Or worse, depending on your interpretation. Because I am going to try and use rapport again, so I can at least placate him, and then I can drop down and get some free damage. You can see he's now been buffed by the clerics, but if I use a skull, he'll come very close. And here we go with rapport. Should have been a direct hit. Speaking of direct hits, I both got the plunging attack and a massive attack from his greatsword. And this is where it all goes terribly wrong. Because you see, I do realize that I need to take care of those clerics, but the Lothric Knight realized he had to take care of me, and take care of me he did. So now it's safe to say that I've learned my lesson, right? Does that really sound like me? Here I am testing the limit of rapport, and sure enough he's out of range, which I'm fairly sure that I knew. But let's get him a little bit closer. And we can see by the haze around his head, it has definitely worked. Now we can deal with the clerics, be a little bit more intelligent about this. But what is this? It seems like he's actually still targeting me. Even though you can still see that he's under the influence of rapport, it almost seems like they have this built-in guard against you killing the clerics. I'm not sure if that's the case, because he still seems to be a little bit confused and he swings wildly. But he is clearly aggroed on me at times. I'm not really sure what's going on here. You can see we also hit that knight and he didn't kill the cleric, which means it is going to be up to me. But what we need to do is get this knight away from him before we actually try and kill that cleric, or else we're going to be in a world of hurt. Speaking of world of hurt, just watch out for the blessed weapon. And here is where not killing the cleric really stands out. You can see here he's well below half. And now he's at full. Here's your public service announcement for today. Always, always prioritize killing the clerics. And now that he's dead, we can run around like a chicken with our head cut off. Apparently put as much distance between us as we can. There we go. Once we get his attention with the alluring skull, the free damage is ours, and we can just go to town. Or at least that would be in a perfect world. He is finally dead. We get a large Titanite shard and only one more Lothric Knight to go. Hooray! Using my alluring skulls like they're going out of fashion. Unfortunately, I was just a little bit too slow on that charge R2, so he was able to get his shield up. But I have more skulls. Last knight dead, we get another large Titanite shard. And then before we actually go up the stairs, head to the other side because there is an item just over here. And it's another ember. Something of which you really can't have too many. Running up the stairs, we can actually say that we're nearly done with Lothric Castle. But we have a couple of things that we want to do and some more items to collect, including out on this balcony, we get the red tearstone ring. If you use this in Dark Souls 1 or even Dark Souls 2 before they nerfed it, you might be really excited to get this. Unfortunately, this is the worst version of the red tearstone ring in the Dark Souls series. When you are under 20% HP, you'll get a 20% boost to all of your damage. Unfortunately, I say this is the worst version because in Dark Souls 1 it was 50%, and in Dark Souls 3 you only had to be below 30% to get the 20% boost. You can see that this contraption does not move. That is actually a shortcut to the next area once we've unlocked it. But over here we have 2 rustic coins, and then over in this chest we get a single Titanite scale. But you probably heard that familiar sound of a summon sign, and down here, if you wish, you can summon Eygon of Karim for the battle against the Dragonslayer Armor. Now, in order to do that, you have to be on familiar terms with Eygon, so keep in mind, if you aggro him for any reason, he will not be summonable. On this corpse next to another elevator, we get a sunlight medal, indicative of what we're about to find. But what I'm going to do is send this elevator down, and I'm going to just tell you this is the one that we saw at the very beginning, and the room that we first saw the Lothric Knight and the Cleric. Another summon sign, Cirrus of the Sunless Realms. If you have been following her questline up to this point, you can also summon her for the fight against the Dragonslayer Armor. And pay no attention to the door that doesn't open from this side. You can see that ladder, which is going to lead us just there a little bit later on. Being smart here, I equip the Silver Cat ring. And then I roll as quickly as I can to get far away from the Puzzle Man. Unfortunately, not quite far enough, and you can see, took off a chunk of health as well as it almost inflicted curse. But if you're truly up against this corner, you can't be hit. Unfortunately, it's also very possible to hit the wall. So now I put my witch's ring back on because I realized what I had done. Take a couple of steps to the right, and now we should be good to go. Some Chaos Bed vestiges later, and 1 fire orb, and the last Pus of Man is now dead. For our troubles, we're given 2 more Titanite chunks and 2 more embers. And he dropped for us another large Titanite shard, lots of upgrade materials. We also get the soul of a crestfallen knight, and then inside we have a chest, and if we take a look, the chain is facing out. So let's aggro this mimic. Put it to sleep. And then we'll just wail on him. And this time, we don't even have to use a second Undead Hunter Charm. We can just finish him off, and we get the Sunlight Straight Sword. This is our second item that seems to indicate the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant could be near. This particular straight sword is upgraded with Twinkling Titanite, and its skill is the Oath of Sunlight. Raise the sword aloft when praising the sun to boost attack and damage absorption for self and allies. This is a really good spell when used in co-op because it does provide 10% damage and 10% damage absorption both to you and any of your co-op allies that are standing close enough. But we're not done looting this area just yet, because over here we get the Braille Divine Tome of Lothric, the last divine tome that we can give to Arena. By handing this to her, we will get the Bountiful Light, Blessed Weapon, and the Magic Barrier Miracles. Once again, just a small fall, but let's go ahead and put the Silver Cat ring on just to negate all damage. And why I didn't keep that menu open? I'm sorry, I just don't know. There's a real lack of consistency. Now, as I near the top of these stairs, you are going to notice a cut. And that is because that door that doesn't open from the side, I actually forgot to go back to that area before I killed the boss, so I had to do it afterwards. So I do apologize for this awkward cut, and you may notice that I have a lot more souls and the boss fog gate is gone, but let's just pretend that I did this right in the flow of things, shall we? Heading back to where we dropped down to the dragon. I did already show it off, but there is this ladder, so let's climb to the top. Ignoring the enemies over to the right, down on the ledge we get yet another Titanite chunk. We do have 2 crossbowmen using exploding bolts, so they will hurt if you let them hit you. But what I want to do is have some fun. Now that the Great Axe wielding Hollow is here, let's see if we can't get him with our rapport, and he can deal with the crossbowman for us. And now we can just sit back and watch the magic. He's still under the effects of rapport, so we can just easily run in and finish him off. Another large Titanite shard is ours. Once again, another fall. And this is why I do recommend the Silver Cat ring here. Even though most of the falls aren't that dangerous, you will take enough chip damage that I think it's worth having the Silver Cat ring on, or at least have it as a backup. And back here, we get the Knight's Ring. This is a very useful ring for soul level 1 characters because simply wearing this ring will increase your strength by 5. It will give you a much bigger variety of weapons to use if you choose not to level up at all. And all that stands between us, the last bit of loot, and the boss is this last Lothric Knight. Fortunately, given everything that I've learned, I'm going to be able to take him out with ease, right? It's like you don't know me at all. Here I am just giving him a fair chance to buff his weapon. Never said I wasn't a good sport. But then he returned the favor by letting me heal. Much appreciated. We get another large Titanite shard. And then walking into this room, there's the door that didn't open. Inside this chest, not a mimic, clearly. 3 Titanite scales. But I tried to make this as dramatic as possible because on the other side of the room is the Altar of Sunlight. That's probably not the music this altar would make. As we pray to it, we get the Praise the Sun gesture, and now we can offer sunlight medals in order to improve our ranks. Turning in 10 sunlight medals will give you the Sacred Oath Miracle, which requires 28 faith to cast, and it does last for 60 seconds, otherwise it functions the same as the Oath of Sunlight. Turning in 30 of the medals will give you the Great Lightning Spear, which requires 30 faith to cast, and it gives approximately 34% more damage than the standard Lightning Spear. Now the easiest way to get sunlight medals is through co-op, but you can also get it as a red phantom if you kill the host and you're a member of the Warrior of Sunlight Covenant, but you can also farm them from Lothric Knights, but they are a fairly rare drop. And as I stated, yes, the fog gate is gone because at this point the boss is long since dead. One smooth and barely noticeable transition later, and here we are back at the fog gate. ready to prepare and face off against the Dragonslayer Armor. Let's simply adjust our consumables because we don't need most of these. We'll just leave the Estus Flask and the Green Blossom. And fortunately for us, the Dragonslayer Armor is weak to frost, and that is exactly why I chose this particular weapon. As we enter, the Pilgrim Butterfly ascends, and the Dragonslayer Armor is on us quickly. Now the name of the game here is dodging. I do not recommend a shield for this fight because he can be so aggressive that your stability, no matter how high it is on a shield, is going to be reduced fairly quickly. And here you can see how great that burst damage can be from a frostbite weapon. The key to this fight is understanding when he's about to combo and when his attacks are going to be single, and that really just takes practice. Once you get him near the 50% health mark, he is going to drop down like this. Don't mistake this for a stagger. You can go in and get a couple of hits like I did, but then you need to roll out quickly. And while in second phase, he does become a lot more dangerous. And you can see here that some of his attacks do have the follow-up wind movement, just like the Nameless King, and that's not by mistake. When you see him raise his great axe over his head, don't run away in fear because this is actually a great move to punish. Simply time your dodge and get behind him and you can get a few hits in very easily. And now you can see the other danger of this fight in phase 2, and that is the Pilgrim Butterflies themselves. They can shoot these projectiles, but then they can also cause this laser that will burn the ground and cause a small explosion. So at this point you have to focus not only on the armor, but you also have to be situationally aware of the Pilgrim Butterflies. Speaking of, the Pilgrim Butterflies can actually be killed, but only during this phase. You can't kill them before you go into the arena, you can't kill them during phase 1, but if you're doing co-op or if you have a very powerful bow or crossbow, you can actually kill them. They have about 3800 HP, so you can decide if it's worth to even try it. But as you can see, even though I don't have a character that is particularly leveled very well, with Frost, the Dragonslayer Armor can go down very quickly. And we're given the soul of the Dragonslayer Armor, and all the butterflies in the nearby area fade away. And we are safe, at least for the time being. Before we look at this soul, let's run to the bonfire just in case something were to happen. At this point, I'm not sure what could, but hey, anything's possible in the world of Dark Souls. The Dragonslayer Armor, controlled by the Pilgrim Butterfly, lost its master long ago, but still remembers their sporting hunts. Consuming this soul will give you 15,000 souls, or you can transpose it with Ludlith in order to get the Dragonslayer Great Axe or the Dragonslayer Great Shield. But we'll be taking a look at those once we get back to Firelink Shrine. And that's exactly where we're headed, right now. Before we go talk to Ludlith, let's head over to Arena and give her this last Braille Tome. Now, I haven't talked much about Arena's quest because, yes, she does have a small quest, but I'll be doing that over the next 2 episodes.
Do you wish to hear a tale? You only have to ask. Oh, you've brought me a Braille Divine Tome. Now I can tell new tales of miracles. Tales of the greater miracles can be quite the epics. What fun we will have.
As mentioned earlier, giving her this tome will unlock Bountiful Light, a miracle that takes 25 faith to cast and will regenerate 7 HP per second for 60 seconds. The Blessed Weapon miracle, which requires 15 faith to cast, it'll increase your weapon damage by 7.5%, it will also provide faith scaling HP regeneration, and it'll give you some bonus damage to skeletons. And we also get the Magic Barrier miracle, which also requires 15 faith, lasts 45 seconds, and this will provide magic damage absorption, but not as high as the Great Magic Barrier. We will be seeing you again very soon, Arena. But now, just to confirm that Greirat has not returned from Lothric Castle, there is his empty stool. We will be seeing him again, just in a rather unfortunate circumstance. We do actually have to head off to get some more gear, but before we do that, let's go talk to Ludlith and take a look at the 2 new pieces of gear we can get with the Dragonslayer Armor Soul. First up, we have the Dragonslayer Great Axe. Now both the Great Axe and the Great Shield have very high strength requirements, the Great Axe having a requirement of 40. You can see that the weapon skill is Falling Bolt, and we also saw this on the Dragonslayer Sword Spear. Even though they share the name, they are slightly different. The Sword Spear actually calls down a bolt of lightning, whereas the Great Axe slams the axe down in front of the user, creating a very large area of effect lightning damage, and that damage that it can put out is very, very high, or potentially can be, as long as you actually hit the enemy directly and have decently high faith. Melted Iron Great Axe that once formed part of the Dragonslayer Armor. Thickly imbued with the power of lightning, use skill to draw upon the techniques used to slay the Archdragons. Next up, we have the Dragonslayer Great Shield. The shield offers high protection to lightning, which the Dragonslayer commanded as his own, and its skill has faint echoes of the Dragonslayer's own fighting style. This takes 38 strength in order to wield, and the shield bash skill, even though it shares the name with many other shields, it is somewhat unique in its animation. This shield also has 95% lightning damage absorption, which is extremely high.
With discourtesy.
Like I said, we do need to do some traveling in order to get the last bit of gear. So let's burn this Undead Bone Shard. And then we're going to be traveling to the Road of Sacrifices bonfire, because this is the closest bonfire to where we found Irina and Eygon. I did leave this short run in because I didn't want you to be confused when I suddenly showed up in Irina's cell if you don't remember how to get there. We'll just run through this building, head up on this elevator. Remembering fondly our dear friend Sigurd. Through this archway, and we have a fresh corpse with a shiny on it. And we can already tell who it is. This was the once great Eygon of Carim. On his corpse, we can get the Morn's Great Hammer and the Moaning Shield. If you attack Eygon earlier, you can also get these items off of his corpse. Morn's Great Hammer is very similar to the Grant weapon that you can get in Dark Souls 1. And the skill is unique. It is Morn's Rage, which creates a powerful shockwave around the user. Great Hammer bestowed upon Carim Knights who demonstrate outstanding strength and unwavering faith, decorated by a warding charm of Carim Temple and imbued with the twisted rage of Apostle Morn. We also get the Moaning Shield. This requires 50 strength in order to wield, but it has very high block across all categories. It also has high stability. The Moan skill is an odd skill, but it'll actually create a noise that attracts nearby enemies. So if you're trying to play the tank in a co-op session, the Moaning Shield is not a terrible idea. Not only do you get great defense out of it, but it can also help to aggro the enemies to you, keeping your other players safe. But also, you can trade this shield into the crows to get a Blessed Gem. Back in Firelink Shrine, before we wrap up, let us talk to the Shrine Handmaid. Because once Eygon is dead, whether by quote-unquote natural causes after you've killed the Dragonslayer Armor, or you've actually killed him yourself, you can then buy the Morn's Armor set. Now I do want to point out that Eygon's name wasn't actually Morn. It is simply that he was a Knight of Carim, and the Morn's equipment is given to these knights. Modeled on Morn, the Archbishop's Apostle, the helm is a perfect likeness to the stone heads lining the cathedral. A Carim Knight will dedicate an entire career to attending a single maiden, just as Morn once served one goddess alone. I've actually heard theories that say Garl Vinland was Morn, but that is just another attempt to connect Demon Souls to Dark Souls when really no true connection exists. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this episode of Everything Possible in Dark Souls 3, and I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave me a comment below and let me know what you learned, and if I missed something, like I did last time, please let me know that too, so I can go back and fix it, but also so we can all keep learning. But I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.